Alright guys, welcome back to another Raid Shadow Legends video. This is Ali Plays. So for this video, I'm actually going to be doing a tier list because we all want to get Lydia the Death Siren if you don't have her already. So we got to get 63 stars on each faction for Faction Wars. So this tier list is going to be for the Argon Tribes faction. So by the time this video is out, the Argon Tribes faction keep should be open or should be close to opening. And I will try to do it for all the other factions. And I'm starting off with the factions I already have 63 stars in. There are champions that are not good in Faction Wars. Doesn't mean they are not good overall. Because champions like a Claude Brawler, they would be good in Clan Boss, not as good in Faction Wars. That's just an example. If you are new to the game, this will help you out. This will help you on deciding which champions you want to build for Faction Wars without wasting too many resources. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so the Argon Tribes faction is not very hard to get 63 stars in, because there are very good champions. Yeah, there are 40 Ogrins in total. But the good news is there's actually a lot of rare champions that are very good for Faction Wars. So for Brawler, he's going to be an S tier. He can be used in a stun set because of all his abilities are AoE. Brawler has block active skills. He has the decreased speed. It's also an AoE. And he also has the decreased attack and decreased defense. So he's an amazing champion for the Argon Tribe. So he's going to be an S tier champion for Argon Tribes. All right, so next up we have Ignatius. So Ignatius, I think he is a middle of the pack champion. He doesn't have an AoE provoke, but the chance of landing that provoke is not a 100% chance to land his provoke. I mean, AoE provoke is very good, but again, it's not a 100% chance. He has an AoE HP burn, and he also has a very slight chance of landing a stun on his A1. So I actually think that he is good for Faction Wars. B is not a bad tier. I'm going to throw him as B because he is not a top tier champion for Faction Wars. But he can help you guys clear Faction Wars if you need to use him. That's the only thing that you have. Yeah, go ahead and use Ignatius. All right, so Brew, I'm not really going to talk too much about him. I wouldn't use him. He does have a poison on his A1, but that's about it. So surprisingly, Cage Breaker, I would actually put him higher than Ignatius. I want to put him as an A. And the reason being is that he has decreased defense on his A1. That's going to help you out against the boss. He has a quadruple hit on his A2, which does decent amount of damage. He also has a 50% chance of putting the enemies to sleep on that ability, which can be helpful if you need to crowd control some enemies. But remember that sleep, right when you hit the enemy, they're going to wake up. That's the only bad thing about sleep. Burn Away, he also attacks all enemies there. And he decreases each target's max HP by 50% of the damage inflicted. And then he gets an extra turn if he kills an enemy. So yeah, I can see him being very good in Faction Wars. I was using him in Faction Wars, but I switched out my team. But yeah, to me, he's an A or a B here. You know, I want to throw him as a B. I don't think he's that much better than Ignatius, so I can't keep him as an A. All right, so the next champion, this guy, what's his name? Rocco the Gaunt. So this guy is a S tier right away. You don't even need to talk too much about him. He can place shield buffs on your allies. You can heal your allies. You can also place increased attack, increased defense, block damage. He's crazy. He has a stun on his A1, and he's very fast champion. Yeah, he's a legendary, so he's very good support for Faction Wars. So we're going to go ahead and throw him in S tier. All right, so Flesh Eater. So Flesh Eater is supposed to be a support champion. He does have freeze on his A1, so I guess that can be rather helpful. And then he also has turn meter manipulation. It's not that good in terms of turn meter manipulation, but I guess it is usable. But he has a crit. He's a support champion, so why would you want to build him with crit? He can also place increased attack on all allies for 2 turns. So I'm actually going to put him as a C. So if you don't have anybody else, C is our champions that you can use to actually clear Faction Wars, but they're not like a top tier champion. So I'm going to put him as a C because he's kind of an awkward support. All right, for Fortress Goon, he's going to be a C. He doesn't have heals. His heals are not that powerful. So that's the reason why he is a C. All right, so the next rare champion I'm actually going to put as an A tier. Fury Stoker. The reason why he's an A tier is he has a passive heal on his, obviously his passive ability. So he can heals the ally with the lowest HP by 7.5% each turn. And this heal can be critical, but he can't heal himself. He also has an ability, his A2 removes all debuffs from a target ally, and then he heals the target by 20%. And the heal increases according to the amount of debuffs removed. So that can be very good. That's the reason why he's an A. His A1 is not that good, but his other 2 abilities, or his passive and his A2, are very good. I'm actually going to put him as an A tier. Sorry, this guy's Frostkin, so we're going to go back. This guy's Fury Stoker. My bad, guys. They look almost identical, man. All right, Frostkin. So he has a freeze on his A1, and then he has his A2. He fully depletes the target's ally's turn meter, and then he heals the ally equal to 50% of the lost turn meter. I can see some use for him, so I'm actually going to throw him in as a C. But yeah, he's not that good, so he can be used. All right, so next up we have Galcut. So Galcut does have decreased defense on his A1. It's a double hit. He can attack all enemies in random order, one by one, and then damage inflicted is decreased by 25% after each hit. So the first guy that he attacks, he deals more damage. I can see that being used in a stun set. And then he also has an AoE attack that places a bomb that detonates after 2 turns. So I do think that he is pretty good with a stun set because he has 2 AoE abilities, and he also has decreased defense. And bombs, I guess, are not that bad. The only issue is that he's an attack type champion, so he is kind of squishy. So I actually think that he is a B tier. All right, so Gear Grinder is a new champion. I'm going to throw him as an S tier, and I will explain why. So his A1 ability, he places a continuous heal buff on himself for 1 turn if he crits, so he got a ability with crit rate. So he can actually self-support himself. He can actually support himself. He's self-sufficient, and he also supports his allies. So his the funny thing is he's an HP champion, but he's a very good support. He's like one of the top tiers. His A2 heals all allies by 15% of their max HP. And then his A3 ability, he revives a dead ally with 50% HP and 50% turn meter. So that is on a very long cooldown, but if you make this guy fast, he can get more turns and then get this ability up faster. So the reason that he's an S tier is because he has Revive and he has heals. Revive is very vital in getting 3 stars on Faction Wars. So yeah, I got to throw this guy up as an S tier. So he's a second rare that's an S tier. He is a Void champion, so he's going to be harder to get, but he's a rare. So he's not an epic or a legendary. He's amazing. Next guy I want to put as an S tier is this guy. So the good news is Grush the Mangler is free to play. That's going to help out a lot of players. He does provide Leech on his A1. So Leech is good for allies to heal without having lifesteal on them. So it's not like a very big heal, but it does help, especially if you want to get 3 stars. Every single heal counts. He has an AoE that plays a decreased attack and decreased crit damage, which is very vital in Faction Wars. And then he also has an AoE that places a continuous heal buff on all allies for 2 turns. So he does provide heals, but his heals he doesn't heal right away. So continuous heal heals, and an ally gives a turn. So I do think he's still S tier. For that, also his aura skill is very good for Faction Wars. Increase ally defense and faction crits by 30%. All right, so we have Grimskin next. All right, so Grimskin is actually going to be an A tier, and I'll explain why. I do think that he is better than Ignatius for Faction Wars, and he's an epic champion, so he's kind of easier to get than Ignatius. So his A1, he has decreased speed. Very important right there. He does have a provoke. The way that his provoke works, he actually attacks one enemy twice, and then each hit, if you book him out, he has 70% chance of placing a provoke. So if he places that provoke, he also has an additional 60% chance of placing a provoke debuff on all enemies for 1 turn. If he actually lands the first provoke. And then his A3 ability, he attacks all enemies, and then he can remove a random buff from each target. That will be very helpful. Those guys in Faction Wars, the buffs are pretty strong for the enemies. So he's going to be an A tier. All right, so Grunge is a champion I do not have, but I can see this guy actually being an S tier. The reason being, if you guys actually haven't noticed, most of the champions here are support champions in some way. Brawler is not support, but he's good crowd control. Yeah, so if you guys haven't noticed, Faction Wars support champions are amazing. So Grunge Killjoy, aka the Grinch, he has a block buffs ability on his A1. He also has an AoE that places a bomb that detonates after 1 turn. And then he also has an ability, A3, removes all debuffs from all allies, and then places the 15% continuous heal buff on each ally for every debuff removed from them. And then he also has a passive. He fills the turn meter of all allies by 10% whenever a bomb debuff detonates on an enemy. So if you use this guy with the other bomb guy, who was the other bomb guy? Galcut? Yeah, I think it was Galcut. You use him with Galcut, so that would actually bring Galcut up. If you combine him with, he would be an A tier. If you combine him with Grunge. All right, next up we have Gurga the Ogre. So he's an S tier because he's able to remove buffs from all enemies and placing freeze on them. So that's amazing crowd control. And then he also gets an extra turn. He synergizes very well with his A1. Plays an extra hit if the target has a freeze debuff. Also with his A3 ability, places an extra hit if the target has a freeze debuff. And his passive ability has a 50% chance of placing freeze debuff on the attacker for 1 turn if this champion loses more than 20% of the max HP on 1 attack. And yeah, overall he's very good. His aura skill is amazing for fashion crypts if you want to do more damage. Yeah, he's an S tier. Griptuck Mossbeard is actually an S tier. I know I've talked a lot of trash about Griptuck, but for Faction Wars, he is an S tier. And let me explain why. His A3 ability, he can actually place block buffs on all enemies for 2 turns, which is amazing. But the thing is, though, he actually places poison on the allies. But he places poisons, and then he can also place continuous heal on his A1 on all your allies that have poison on them. And then he can also cleanse them. He doesn't cleanse poisons, but he can actually cleanse your allies, and then he heals them by 30% of their max HP, and then he places a shield buff. And his passive, it says allies under poison debuffs inflict 7.5% more damage for each poison debuff on them. So he's going to allow your guys to do more damage, but stacks to a maximum of 30%. And this damage increase applies to all of their skills as well. And then he also increases each ally's resistance by 15 for each poison debuff on them. So yeah, it is a double-edged sword. You're going to be taking damage, but his continuous heal should be able to offset the damage that you take from the poisons, but you will be dishing out more damage. And when combined with a called Brawler, he actually brings up called Brawler up to, in my opinion, an A tier. I actually cleared Faction Wars with him and a called Brawler. I would actually say he brings a called Brawler up to an A tier. But if you do not have Griptuck Mossbeard, called Brawler would actually be a C tier champion. I wouldn't recommend using a called Brawler without Griptuck Mossbeard in Faction Wars. And the reason being, so yeah, we're done with Griptuck Mossbeard, but we're going to talk about the synergy here. The reason being is that a called Brawler, his A2 ability synergizes very well with Griptuck Mossbeard. So Griptuck Mossbeard places 3 poison debuffs on all allies. So let's assume that you have a called Brawler in your team. When a called Brawler actually is under 3 or more debuff, his attack is always critical. And then he can also ignore 30% of enemy defense, as well as place block revive on the enemy. So that is actually amazing. He does more damage. And then when he actually takes a turn, he actually places 1 or more poison on himself, which will actually take him to the threshold where he's actually under 4 debuffs. So he heals by 30% of the damage inflicted. If he's actually under 5, he grants himself an extra turn. Overall, he's good. He's going to be, every time he uses his ability, he's actually going to be removing the poisons. And Griptuck is actually going to provide him with more damage. So yeah, he would be an A tier champion if Griptuck Mossbeard was on his team. Otherwise, he is a C. Moving on, I think this guy is a do not use, but I'm going to throw him as a C because he does have some useful abilities. He does have a shield to use on your champions. On his A1 ability, he has a stun, but that is only a 20% chance to land. So I actually put him as a C tier. Personally, I wouldn't use him. I wouldn't use actually build uncommons for Faction Wars, but just for this tier list, we're going to throw him on there. Yo, this is Ignatius, man. All right, Big Gun. Big Gun is S tier. Ignatius is B. They kind of look the same. Dang, man. All right, so the profile pictures actually screwed me up. So yeah, Ignatius is B tier. Let's talk about Big Gun. So Big Gun is an amazing champion. He does a lot of damage. He is kind of cheap, man. This is like, he's not even fair. He has a stun on his A2. It's an AoE ability. Basically, all his abilities are AoE if he crits. So we got to build him with crit. But he has a stun on his A2. And then he can also place decreased accuracy on the enemies. And then he also has the ability to actually decrease his turn meter by 25%, while also placing decreased speed. So he's an amazing champion. Not much else to say about him. He does do a lot of damage. And if you have him. So yeah, this is Big Gun and this is Ignatius. Sorry about that, guys. I should have written on the screen that I messed up with the profile pictures. And I've already done that with Fury Stoker and Frostkin. But still, it's accurate. All right, now we got Claude, Beast Feeder. All right, so Claude is actually an interesting champion. He is new. I did pull him, but I actually never used him to get 63 stars in Argon Jailer's Faction Wars. I would have actually used him if I was struggling. So his A2, he plays a shield buff on all allies equal to 20% of his max HP for 2 turns. So that is good that it's his max HP, not the allies, because he's HP based, build him a lot of HP, make him fast, and you're all set. And then he also has increased speed buff and increased accuracy buff to all allies for 2 turns, which is amazing. Passive ability, he heals the ally with the lowest HP by 10% of their max HP at the start of this champion's turn. So yeah, he's very good. He has heals, he has buffs, and he also has shields, man. And he has very high base speed, 110. So yeah, this guy, Claude, the beast breastfeeder, gonna go up to S tier. All right, now we got Magma Blood. All right, so Magma Blood is interesting. If you combine Magma Blood with Grunge and Galcut, this guy is A tier along with Galcut, right? But by himself, I actually think he is a B tier. And the reason being is that he has an AoE ability that places decreased accuracy. If you throw him with a stun set, his stun set is not going to be reliable on him. But if you throw him with a stun set, he can actually be serviceable. He has a stun on his A1, and then he also has that ability. The reason being Galcut and Grunge, as I said, is because he actually has bombs in his case. So he attacks 2 times at random. Each has a 60% chance of placing a bomb debuff for 3 turns. 3 turns is very long. So yeah, I actually think he can be. Actually, I think he's a C tier that can be a B tier combined with Grunge and Galcut. All right, Maneater, I think he is an S tier. So he has unkillable and block debuffs for all your allies, which is amazing. And he also has Siphon. If you build him with enough accuracy, he can actually fully deplete a target's turn meter and then add that onto his turn meter, giving himself an extra turn, which will help decrease the cooldown of Ancient Blood. And his A1, he can place decreased attack on all enemies. So build him with crit, because when he crits, he plays a decreased attack on all enemies. So yeah, very, very good champion for Faction Wars. He is an S tier. All right, so the other Void Rare champion is going to be an S tier as well. He is a very good support champion. As I said, most support champions are S tiers for Faction Wars. So his A1, he actually heals himself by 30% of the damage inflicted, and he also heals an ally with the lowest HP by 10% of their max HP. Very good ability there on his A1. He heals himself and an ally. His A2 ability places a shield buff on himself for 2 turns. And then he places ally protection buff on all allies 2 turns, and he heals all allies except himself by 10% of their max HP. And passive ability decreases the damage of all allies received by 5%. This champion will receive that damage instead. So I guess you got to make this guy very, very tanky. I haven't actually used him yet for Faction Wars, but I do have him. And I consider him an S tier champion for Faction Wars. All right, Argon Jailer, he's going to be in C tier. He can actually steal buffs. I actually do have a video on him if you guys want to check it out. Wagon Jailer. So he has a 40% chance of removing one random buff from the target on his A1. That's unbooked. If you actually book it, it's going to be a 60% chance. And then his A2 ability is where he actually steals buffs. So he can steal 2 random buffs from a target, and he plays an extra hit if any buff is stolen. And if a target has no buffs, he actually does more damage on his A3. So I don't think that he is top tier for Faction Wars, but he is a C tier. All right, next guy. All right, now we have Pounder. All right, so Pounder is interesting because he actually has decreased attack on his A1, and he also has freeze on his A2, but they're all both single target abilities. And you can also actually increase the resistance of your allies for every buff on him. But I would still say he's a C tier. All right, so Prandar, I think he is an S tier. He's a provoker. He has pretty cool abilities. He has decreased speed on his A1. And then also, if he's counterattacking with this ability, his A1, he can actually place a stun on an enemy. So if you build him with retaliation, hopefully he'll be counterattacking. Hulking Tantrum is an AoE that plays a provoke debuff, also plays an increased defense on himself. His A3 ability places strengthen buff and continuous heal buff on all allies for 2 turns, which is very good. And then he also receives 20% less damage from enemies under provoke debuffs. And he also has a 25% chance of counterattacking whenever an enemy under a provoke debuff attacks either this champion or an ally. So he is amazing for Faction Wars. Rocktooth, I do think he is decent for early game, but I'm going to throw him as a C tier because we're talking about 63 starring Faction Wars. All right, so Roughstone, I do think he is very good. If you actually block out his A2 and his A3, you can be a champion that with a stun set, he can be a champion that crowd controls. It's like Brawler, but he is a worse version of Brawler, so I can see him as an A tier. If you alter the AI, make it so that he only uses A1. But yeah, Brawler is better, so yeah, he's going to be an A tier for me. All right, so Shamrock, I actually think he's an S tier. He does have continuous heals. He has revive on deaths. He has increased turn meter, and overall very good for Faction Wars. Shatterbones, I actually think he's an S tier as well. He's one of those underrated champions that I did a video on. He's basically like a budget Lysandra. The reason being, he has an ability that attacks all enemies 3 times, so he is kind of like a nuker as well. And he has a 50% chance to decrease turn meter by 30%. So you can decrease turn meter with an AoE ability that does a lot of damage. He has the ability to place decreased speed debuff on all enemies for 2 turns, and then he also fills the turn meter of all allies by 25%. Overall, he's a S tier champion for Faction Wars. Make sure you build him properly. All right, so Siegebreaker. I kind of see him better than all these champions down here for Faction Wars. I'm going to throw him in as a B. Obviously, he is worse than Ignatius and Siegebreaker, but still, I think he's still at that level. The reason being is that his A2 ability, he actually plays block active skills for 1 turn if the attack is critical. You got to build him with crit, but that ability is very crazy. Blocking active skills. And then he can also place increased crit rate on himself, and then he attacks all enemies. And then he has a 50% chance of decreasing the turn meter by 30% if the attack is critical. So he does have the ability to decrease AoE, decrease turn meter, and block active skills. So that alone is very powerful. So yeah, I do see him as being a B tier for Faction Wars. All right, so Siege Hulk is one of those new champions that was part of the fusion for Herndig. A lot of people should have him. He is actually an A tier. I don't see him. He's almost S tier. I don't see him as S tier yet. Yeah, he has decreased defense. He can actually decrease targets turn meter by 15% if they're under decreased defense or decreased speed. His A2 ability places increased attack on himself for 2 turns, then attacks all enemies. And then he also places a decreased defense debuff. He has increased crit rate, increased crit damage, and then he attacks an enemy, and he also places decreased speed. So he could have been better if he actually places those buffs on his allies as well, but since he only does it on himself, I'm going to put him as an A tier. He's almost a B tier too. Should I just drop him? I don't know, man. I'm going to drop him. I'm going to drop him in B tier, so he's a B tier. All right, so unfortunately, Skull Crusher doesn't really translate very well Faction Wars. So I'm going to throw him in as a B tier. He's not a top tier champion. He does have counterattack. He's not a top tier champion for Faction Wars, but he does have counterattack. That alone puts him as a B tier. All right, so this guy, Stone Skin, is going to be a C tier. He does have some pretty decent abilities like decrease AoE, decrease speed. But other than that, he's kind of a selfish champion. So he fills his own turn meter, plays increased defense on himself. And he also has provoke on his A1, but I still see him as a C tier. Thrasher is going to be a C tier. He's almost a don't use. Block buffs on his A2. Other than that, I wouldn't use him. All right, so Towering Titan, I think he's an A tier. And the reason being is he has AoE provoke, almost AoE. He attacks 4 times at random, and the first hit is a 100% chance of placing provoke. And then each of the other hits has a 60% chance if you book it. Otherwise, it's 50% of placing provoke for 1 turn. So potentially, you can get from anywhere from 1 to 4 provokes on this ability. But not only that, he also has an AoE increased defense as well as continuous heal, and he also places continuous heal on himself as well as a shield, and then he gets an extra turn. And then he also has decreased defense on his A1. So I do see him as having more use than Ignatius, just a bit for Faction War, so that he's up here. Anyways, any other areas of the game, Ignatius obviously would be better, so I can't stress that enough. This is a Faction Wars tier list. Remember that, guys. It's not the whole game, it's just Faction Wars. All right, so Hugo, I'm going to throw him or her as an S tier. I think it's a her. Anyways, S tier. The reason being is that she has a leech on her A1, and then for each enemy alive, that chance of it actually increases of landing the leech. She has an AoE that places decreased defense as well as block buffs, so block buffs is crucial. Their chance of placing block buffs actually increases by 5% for each alive enemy. And her A3 ability removes all heal reduction debuffs from all allies, so that is actually pretty clutch if you're trying to heal your allies and you can't because they have heal reduction. And she removes a random debuff from all allies as well. And then heals all allies by 20% of this champion's max HP. So always the heals are bigger if it's from the support champion's max HP as opposed to your allies. And if all allies are dead, revives them with 50% HP and then fills the turn meter by 50% instead. Yeah, so AoE revive is amazing. Final Spite, your passive places a 30% increased speed buff and block damage buff on the champion for 1 turn. Whenever this champion's last living ally is killed. So yeah, she basically guarantees that you're going to revive your allies. So S tier champion, definitely. All right, so next up we have Wagon Bay, aka War Mother Jr. So Wagon Bane is all right. I would say she's above C tier, so she's going to be a B tier. And then War Mother, we had War Mother Jr., who's B tier, and then we have War Mother. So War Mother is interesting When combined with Grunge, I actually do think that she is higher because she has the ability to instantly detonate all bombs if she crits. And then she can also place 2 bombs that detonate after 3 turns. And she deals 100% bomb damage increased by 100% against bosses with her. And she also has decreased attack on her A1. So without Grunge and all the other bomb champions, without them, I would actually say she is a C tier. C or B? I'm going to say C. And then with Grunge, I do think that she's an A. So right now, I'm going to throw her as a C, fortunately. All right, guys, so this is my tier list for Faction Wars. Hopefully it helps you guys out in clearing Faction Wars. Make sure that team synergy is very important. You can't win Faction Wars with a whole bunch of support because you're not going to have enough damage. And you can't win Faction Wars with a whole bunch of damage because you're not going to be able to survive to actually dish out the damage. So make sure you guys build a smart team. And hopefully this tier list helps you guys out. Make sure you guys drop a like as well. And thank you guys for watching the video. I'll see you guys in the next one.
I'm Tyrone. I need everybody to subscribe to the homie Ali Al Plays. And that's non-negotiable either.